You're listening to Soundside. I'm senior producer Gabrielle Healy. This week, we're hitting the highlight reel. Soundside's producers are choosing our favorite recent segments for every show this week. And coming up on the show today, in the early 80s, a new music scene blossomed in Seattle. Disco was fading, and grunge was barely a twinkle in the eye. Hip-hop was the name of the game. From Sir Mix-a-Lot to Jam Delight, Seattle was home to legendary hip-hop pioneers. We're revisiting our conversation with local author and producer Novocaine 132 to explore Seattle's early rap artists and how they set the tone for decades of music to follow. That's coming up in about 20 minutes. But first, a conversation about your rights if you encounter immigration and customs enforcement agents. Regardless of your legal status in this country, the Constitution provides certain legal protections to everyone. Host Libby Denkman talked with Henry Wong, a directing attorney for the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project back in May, about what those protections are. Here's that conversation.
We want to get to specific advice here, and you can only give general guidance, of course. Every situation is different, so these are broad brushes we're going to be painting with. But let's start with a common scenario. People getting arrested at a regularly scheduled check-in with an immigration official. If you are a person with one of these appointments coming up, what should you do?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's a very common scenario where people are arrested, are at these check-ins where people have agreed to come in and they're not a flight risk. They're at regularly scheduled appointments that happen maybe once a year, maybe they happen every couple of months. And if you think that you are at all at risk of being detained, and here I would be speaking to people that maybe have had some contact with law enforcement or have been ordered removed by an immigration judge, I would urge any of those people to talk to an immigration lawyer before you go, to understand the risks, understand what you might need to plan for in the case that you are detained at that check-in.
This may seem very specific, but is there anything that you should hold on your person, like any specific extra documentation or phone numbers that you should be taking into any kind of interaction with immigration authorities right now?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go back to what you had mentioned, which was very smart, that there are no sort of bright line rules. There's no advice that I can give across the board, but certainly there are certain documents that depend on your specific situation. So this is all the more reason to visit an immigration attorney, to talk to someone with experience, because there are absolutely some documents that you can carry that will help protect you. An easy example I think that I can give is that if you are, in fact, a green card holder, a lawful permanent resident, and you've really never had any contact with police and you've never left this country for any long periods of time, by and large, absolutely, you should carry that green card with you at all times.
Another scenario involves you're out driving and you are pulled over by immigration officials, by ICE. Do you have the right, for example, to not roll down the window if you have an ICE officer at your car window?
You do, but you risk them breaking the window, right? I mean, we've seen this a lot now where there's very dramatic video where people are trying to communicate with ICE through a closed window, and it's working. You can hear ICE speaking back, with the audio in the car that's being recorded, but ICE just immediately escalates the situation and smashes the window. So by and large, my advice is that you do crack open that window just a little bit. We're talking like an inch or two, so that you can communicate with ICE. Now, your original question is, what should you do if you're pulled over? So I do think that you should, crack open that window. I think that you should, first of all, of course, pull over in a safe way, right? To pull over to a safe area. And I would probably keep my hands on the steering wheel as well. I think we all understand the risks of driving while brown or black, that police might have unfair associations or make unfair assumptions about those types of drivers. But once you've pulled over and once they're approaching your vehicle, there's only three things that I would have ready for them. And that is your driver's license, your car insurance, and your car registration. Now, apart from that, if you're the driver, I would not answer any other questions. If they start to ask you questions about where are you from, are you a citizen, I would exercise your right to remain silent. Now, it's slightly different if you are a passenger. So as I said, if you're a driver, you can hand over, or you should hand over your driver's license and possibly your proof of insurance and registration. But if you're a passenger in that car, I would absolutely just exercise my right to remain silent. I would not show them any ID, even if they asked for it. At most, I would tell them that I would like to speak to a lawyer before answering your questions. There are also a few things that you probably should not do. You should not show them any false documentation. You should not lie. And of course, you shouldn't try to run away or try to flee that situation.
What if somebody comes to your door? What if an ICE official comes knocking? What are your rights there?
Yeah, if you're at your home, and this again goes to something that you mentioned earlier, which is the Constitution protects everyone. It protects both citizens and non-citizens alike. And one of the great protections we have is in the Fourth Amendment, right? Security in our home. And so if ICE comes knocking at your door, my broad advice is just don't answer the door. Just don't answer the door. It is unlikely that ICE has a proper judicial warrant that will allow them to enter your home, because your home is a private space that is very well protected by the Constitution. And unless they have a judicial warrant, they can't just come into your home. And there's only one other way that they could come into your home, and that's through your own permission that you give to them. So if you, for example, open the door just a crack to try to speak with them a little bit, they might construe this as you granting them permission to come in, which is why I generally say just don't answer the door at all, because that way you're not at risk of giving them permission or doing any actions that would construe permission to enter your home.
What about bystanders? If somebody is not involved but witnesses an ICE arrest or witnesses something that they feel is a miscarriage of the law, of course, we all have our phones out all the time. We're taking video. Is there some type of action a bystander can do that would help, that they have the legal right to do?
Absolutely. Bystanders can play a huge role in this right now. The first thing I would say is they would have to use their judgment, right? You have to think about assessing not only your own safety in that moment, but also how your actions might create risks to that community member who's being arrested, right? You don't want to escalate that situation and make it even worse. So you have to exercise some judgment about how close you're going to be, how loud you're going to be, and what actions you're taking. But it is very common now for everyone to carry their cell phones with them, of course. And so it is a natural reaction to record what's happening. I would still suggest that you announce aloud that you are recording before you do so. And I would also add one more caveat that, I don't think that you should be live streaming this. There are some privacy concerns. A lot of immigrants that come here, they might be fleeing persecution, and so have some really serious concerns about their names or their face, being publicized out there. And then the other situation, though, if you do recognize that, this is a really hot situation, remember that taking notes in that moment is also very useful. And if you don't have a pad and paper or pen at that moment, take notes immediately after, because ultimately this evidence is really helpful for people like me, with lawyers, where we can show that the arrest was done unlawfully, that it broke their own regulations or violated the Constitution. And if we have video evidence, of course, that's great. But also if we have what's called contemporaneous notes, so notes that were taken at that time or very soon after, that's also very good evidence that we can use in court.
I have to say, Henry, I have been thinking a lot about this since witnessing the video of Rumeysa Ozturk, the grad student who was grabbed at Tufts by mostly plainclothes officers. Many had masks on. There are bystanders watching this go down on the video that you can hear saying, "Who are you? What is going on?" Is there a situation in which having video or having these kind of notes could make a difference later on in the outcomes for somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it could. For the reasons that I mentioned before, which is that in many instances, you asked about the home and the car and in different areas. ICE is always I think, trying to push the boundaries of what's proper and what's not. And so to the extent that you can record these or have evidence of the actions that they're taking, lawyers certainly can use that to show in court how they're sort of violating their own regulations, their own policies, but also the constitutional policies. And that in turn can hold ICE accountable. There has been very successful litigation about warrantless arrests and the steps that ICE now needs to take to show that, in fact, they had probable cause, that they weren't just racial profiling when they were arresting somebody. So that is helpful, of course, for my colleagues and myself in the legal world. But also it's helpful, I think, because by virtue of it being publicized, by people knowing about this, they will start, I hope, contacting their legislators, contacting people to say this seems really inappropriate. And there's also other pressure points that are not within the legal realm that I think are equally, if not even more helpful in these situations. So you may feel like you're a little bit helpless, that you're actually not doing all that much. But in fact, you are. I mean, so long as you continue to be involved and continue to document and to take action where you are seeing some sort of injustice being done, that is absolutely helpful.
Some people might hear this and think, Henry, you are advocating breaking the law or not cooperating with a member of law enforcement. You're advocating escalating the situation. What's your response to that?
I think exercising your constitutional rights is never a wrong thing. I mean, you are absolutely empowered, both you as a citizen, or if you are a non-citizen, you have constitutional rights. And it's really important for us to invoke these rights in the face of what we're encountering right now. Because what we're seeing is the government is clearly trying to create this atmosphere of sort of fear and chaos. And to the extent that they can succeed in that, that means they won't care if they're trampling over people's constitutional rights. It'll embolden them to do even perhaps worse things, right? And so to the extent that we can document this, that we can invoke our rights, and we can, frankly, stand up to what's happening, that's the only way we can counter this situation in my mind.
We've been talking with Henry Wong, one of the directing attorneys for the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, about regional ICE enforcement and knowing your rights when you encounter ICE or some kind of immigration official, either as a bystander or as somebody who is on a visa, on a green card, undocumented. Anything else you want to add here, Henry? I think that there is so much fluid in this space. One, because much of this is going up to the Supreme Court, whether or not the Alien Enemies Act can be invoked to speed these deportations. There is conversation about, among Stephen Miller and other presidential aides about suspending habeas corpus in some instance, which is the right to challenge your detention in court. Anything else that you want to add just as final thoughts here as you are trying to advise your clients, trying to let people know their rights and how to hold on to those even at a time when they're being challenged in many ways?
What I would like listeners to know is that, I mean, it sounds cliche, but it really makes a difference if you become involved. I think that your listeners are probably, really well informed about events that are happening. And I just hope that people just take that next step, right? That next step of either learning a little bit more, contacting their local representative, or thinking about even gathering with their own community members to see how they can support this community that's really being vilified right now. A lot of the really important things that have been important protections that have happened because of people organizing. I think of DACA, right? The Dreamers. During the Obama campaign, Obama was the deporter in chief, right? And for a long time, he would ignore a large segment of the population, these protesters that would come to his speeches, and they just did not give up. They continued to organize, they continued to take action. And at one point, it reached the point where their voices had to be heard, where they were taking the right steps by taking action, and they were garnering support broadly as well. And suddenly you had this really important changes to our immigration system where we just protected a large segment of the population. But this was not done, I don't think, in my mind, by lawyers or by politicians. It was really done by the people. And so what we're seeing right now happening, I think, our best defense right now is more people to understand what's happening and to take action against it.
Henry Wong with Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. Thank you.
Thanks, Libby.
Since we talked to Henry, President Trump has signed a huge tax and spending package into law. NPR reports that it allocates about $170 billion for the Trump administration's border and immigration goals. Next up, we're talking about the birth of Seattle rap. Stay close, we're coming right back. You're listening to Soundside. I'm Gabrielle Healy. You're listening to Soundside. I'm Gabrielle Healy. Let's switch gears now for some music. While some of you might be more familiar with Seattle rappers like Macklemore or one of my new favorites, Du Normal, rap here has much deeper roots. So let's listen back to a conversation about how the genre got started in the Emerald City. Our guide was music writer Ben Camp, the author of The Birth of Seattle Rap. Camp writes under the name Novocaine 132. He talked with former Soundside producer Alec Cowan in March. Here's that conversation. Alec gets us started.
It was 1980, your favorite Seattle discotheque. Good Times by Chic is spinning over the speakers. It's a massive hit and a crowd pleaser. And then the song changes.
Well, Chic, what happened was Sugar Hill Gang and Sylvia Robinson, who ran Sugar Hill Records, they very wisely intuited the fact that this was a zeitgeist moment. And people especially loved the middle of Good Times. And why? Because there was a really cool breakdown where it just went to the essentials of the beat. They took out all the other background instruments and just gave you the beat. And I think for rappers and for a lot of people in the nightclubs, that was a moment of light bulb over the head inspiration. One of the DJs that I've talked to is named DJ Mike Joyce. He remembers very clearly being able to mix those two songs together and sort of introduce rap to his listeners when they certainly would not even know that they're listening to rap until the words sunk into the listeners' heads. And so rap did come through in a Trojan horse environment, but it exploded shortly after that.
As Ben Camp tells the story, Rapper's Delight, rap's first nationwide hit, made an imprint in Seattle, and it kicked off a vibrant local scene connecting Sir Mix-a-Lot to Macklemore. Camp, who writes under the name Novocaine 132, has been covering music in the city since the 1990s, and he recently published his first book, The Birth of Seattle Rap, out now. I caught up with the writer to hear more about the book and Seattle's pre-grunge music scene, starting with why disco gave way to hip-hop.
I think I would describe it as the friction between live musicians and recorded music, because disco DJs, all they did was buy records at the store and go play them in the club. So if you're a pure musician, you might take offense to that and say, they're not really musicians, they're just putting records on. This isn't a real culture. There was a lot of sort of live music versus recorded music friction, I think, in a lot of cities as well, including Seattle. And so to that point, if I was a bassist, if I was a live drummer, I might feel like I was losing gigs, literally, because bars were not hiring our band anymore. So that could have been not just a hypothetical situation for a lot of musicians. However, hip-hop is essentially based on pre-recorded beats and pre-recorded records. It was for a long time. And so that's the kinship of disco to rap, I think, is these early disco records had the beats that inspired the early rappers, essentially.
What was the first track or album that really hooked you onto Seattle rap?
Well, music from Seattle, I was living in the North End, and most of the Seattle rap culture was taking place in the Central District or the South End. So at my high school, I was exposed to Sir Mix-a-Lot Swass was the first album. This was 1988. And I would say it swept through my high school in a way that a few musical albums had. Swass was just a giant cultural moment, because on the cover of the album, there was Sir Mix-a-Lot and there was the Space Needle. And as high school kids, we thought this was just amazing to see our city involved in a hip-hop album. It just seemed, to me, it seemed amazing. However, little did I know, there had been Seattle rappers for at least 8 years prior to that.
Yeah, and I think we'll probably reverse engineer that journey to Sir Mix-a-Lot a little bit. So Rapper's Delight arrives in Seattle. It's, as you talk about in the book, it inspires the city's earliest rappers who start battling each other over basically who can most accurately memorize all of the words to the song. But who was some of the early local talent who took that New York rap product, like Rapper's Delight, and turned it into a Seattle one?
I think I would mention three groups right away that didn't have any influences, that were seeing it and doing it for the first time here in Seattle. The first group I'm going to mention was the lesser known of the three. They're called Cosmic Crew, and they were Mellow Mike and Frostmaster Chill at Garfield High School. They figured out how to write raps on their own. They figured out how to make drum beats on a table if they had to. And so that's one group. A second group is called Jam Delight. Jam Delight was in West Seattle. That's a musician named Big Boss Cross and his partner Gary Jam. And Jam Delight was also a pioneer in rap. They did it even bigger than Cosmic Crew had done. And they went out and performed in public, performed in nightclubs. But the third group I have to mention, which became far and away the largest, was named Emerald Street Boys after the slogan Emerald City, which was given to the city in September of 1981.
New rhythmic sounds that makes me get down. I want to hear the show on the radio. Go berserk. Put your body to work.
And tell me about what that early scene was like, because you didn't really have all-in-one rappers and producers to rap. You also needed a DJ to cut the vinyl. You probably need a breaker to add some stage entertainment. So paint that picture for me of what that early Seattle rap world actually looked like.
I think what comes to mind is a story told to me by a gentleman named Sir Lover, the MC. And he's one of the sources for the book as well. Early rapper from Seattle named Sir Lover. And he describes a typical event might be at the Boys and Girls Club or the community center in your neighborhood, where you would go to the place where you'd play basketball during the week, or you might go there to play cards or, play billiards. There's lots of different things you could do at your community centers and at the Boys and Girls Clubs. However, on Friday and Saturday nights, the Boys and Girls Club might set up someone with a DJ setup on a table at the end of the gymnasium, and then all the young people would be able to dance in the gym and listen to this DJ. And the very special part, according to Sir Lover, is usually whoever was DJing would let kids rap at some point during the show, and that was always the highlight. They would look forward to that when the DJ would say, okay, all the kids line up. And here's what Sir Lover's strategy was, and I always love this. He said all the kids would fight to be first, and he would let them go first, and then second, and then third. He would always take the last spot, and of course, the reason why, he was the last thing on everyone's mind when they left the community center that night, or when they left the Boys and Girls Club. He was the last rapper that they had heard, and so his raps were still in their mind. And he just loves that memory of waiting for the DJ to tell him, okay, kids, line up.
Well, the way you're describing it, it feels very off the cuff. I mean, was there much money to be made in local rap, I guess particularly at this time?
Well, most of the rappers in Seattle at the time, during the entire period of my book, never made a penny from their art. So I have to put that out there. This was not something that was a moneymaker. Nobody was doing this to make money. And I find that is inspiring to me, because these young people were doing this for the love of poetry, for the love of being into a new culture. There was never a sense that I'm going to make $100,000 from this or make $1 million from this, although that might have been part of the dream. I'm not going to take that away from anybody. But the only commercially successful group was really Emerald Street Boys, who put out a record in 1983, so right in the middle of my book. But I think where the success would come in, if you were an artist at that time, would be that people were playing your tape everywhere. And that's all that mattered, was being in someone's tape deck, being on the radio, which was KFOX, 1250 AM. And if the DJ Nasty Ness was playing your song, then you had made it here in Seattle. And so that was the mark of success rather than a financial success.
Yeah, and DJ Nasty Ness, he wrote the foreword to the book. He was a close friend of yours. He's really a character who's present throughout this entire history, whether it's the early KFOX spins or he later had a show at what eventually became KEXP. I mean, it sounds like he really helped put both national and local rap tracks into people's ears. So tell me a bit about his impact on Seattle's rap legacy.
Well, Nasty Ness has a famous story that he tells where when he first tried to play rap on KFOX 1250, his boss was named Steve Mitchell. And Steve Mitchell came into the room, into the studio, grabbed Ness, pulled him out of the studio, and literally gave him a tongue lashing instantly and said, Ness, I don't want to hear you playing rap on the radio anymore. It was so strong of a memory for Ness that he talks about it all the time. But that led to a compromise where they created an all-rap show every Sunday night so that Ness could play the rap music for just 2 hours a week. And Steve Mitchell, we have to credit him for that, to finding that compromise in this new form of music where the regular daytime programming just couldn't accept rap music at KFOX.
Yo, nastiness, we must confess how you rock the turntable best in the West.
It's impossible to overstate his influence. He was literally the godfather of rap in Seattle. He founded the culture here in Seattle. Every single person that ever became in the rap culture in Seattle saw Ness at the top of this pyramid and looked up to him. And it never went to his head. He was always humble. He was always ready to help the next person, the next woman, the next man who's coming along in the game. Ness was just a champion for hip hop all throughout his life. And he's supposed to be here with us celebrating this book. And so it's really a sad moment to think about the fact that he's not here.
Yeah. Also, worked with Mix-a-Lot on Nasty Mix Records as well. One group that you talk about quite a bit in the book as kind of one of the cornerstone influences on rap is a group called Sneeko. It's a production company founded by Steve Sneed and Rico Bembry, and they put on these skit-based theater productions. I mean, just what were these shows? Were they rap shows, theater productions, somewhere in the middle?
I think there's a contemporary analog to that, which is the obsession right now with the first season of Saturday Night Live. As you know, now that they've celebrated 50 years, everyone's obsessed with that first season and what it was like to introduce sketch comedy to America on NBC. In Seattle, Rico Bembry and Steve Sneed saw that same vision unfiltered by the Saturday Night Live world. They set up a situation where you could combine comedy, you could combine magic, you could combine theater, and of course, a little bit of rap involved too, because rap was becoming the language of young people. And so for Sneeko to really see that rap was the new language and to help boost these young people, it's immeasurable the contribution that Sneeko made. Not to mention the fact that Emerald Street Boys, they can credit their success to the management of Sneeko and to the guidance of Sneeko, telling them what might be the best stage presence, what might be the best way to approach their lyrics, what might be the best way to do dance moves. And so to have Sneeko guiding their career was instrumental to Emerald Street Boys.
And along those lines, we have to talk about their first big recorded single. It's iconic, the Christmas rap.
Merry Christmas, I'm from CC, girl. I wait for you up under the tree. What you want for Christmas was a smooth MC, so my gift to you is the rock the party.
What's the story behind Seattle's first huge rap song being a Christmas song?
Well, I don't want to toot my own horn, but the book does have a new reporting on that, which, to my understanding, has never been told. The leader of a group called Teleclear was a man named Tony Benton. Tony Benton started his own record label called Telemusic. And he also, just like Steve Sneed and Rico Bembry, Tony Benton was a community leader who saw that rap could help change the minds of young people. And he wanted to put out a Christmas rap song. So he first approached a group called Silver Chain Gang. This is the part that has never been reported as far as I know. Silver Chain Gang put together a demo tape for Tony Benton, but Tony listened to it. It just wasn't quite what he had in mind for that record project. So the second group he approached was Emerald Street Boys, who of course did come in and record that song in a long one-day session. According to Sweet J, they arrived in the early morning and they didn't leave till late at night. It happened at Woodmont Beach Studio. And this was a legendary thing for the Seattle rap scene.
Say ho, ho, ho. Ho, ho, ho. Say the spirit is here. The spirit is here. Say Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas.
Well, it's weird because, as you're saying, the Emerald Street Boys, they were the undisputed kings of Seattle rap in this era. But Christmas rap is their only song ever to be professionally recorded. It was their only single on vinyl until like 2019. Why is that? Why don't they have more of an accessible catalog, especially considering all the success that they found?
Yes, I think looking back, one would expect a lot more of a catalog from a group like Emerald Street Boys. Circumstances just basically broke the group apart around 1985, and some of the group members have mentioned the fact that Seattle changed a lot in about 85, where the influence of crack cocaine and a lot of gang culture had swept up from California, and it just changed a hip-hop scene that had been fun and lighthearted into something that was much more deadly and much more grim. And a lot of people were turned off to that, and Emerald Street Boys included, because their culture, the Emerald Street Boys came up in the b-boy rap culture, which was about no swearing. It was about trying to say the most clever sentences. And then the gangster rap came along and it was all swearing and nothing clever. It was repetitive. And so I think Emerald Street Boys got turned off to rap during that portion of the era there in the middle of the 80s. And I've always been searching for other songs by Emerald Street Boys, but most of them have been lost to time. So yes, I find it's like an archaeological search just to find a recording from Emerald Street Boys.
Yeah, but Christmas rap lives on. We have to talk about another up-and-coming icon in the scene, in addition to the Emerald Street Boys, and that's Anthony Ray, a.k.a. Spaceman, a.k.a. Sir Mix-a-Lot. How did he get his start in Seattle rap?
Where do we start with Sir Mix-a-Lot? He was always just a creative individual when it came to electronics. And he talks about this in multiple interviews where he liked to take things apart and put them back together as a young kid. If he got walkie-talkies for Christmas, he would disassemble the walkie-talkie and say, what are these little parts in here? And he would ask the guys at Radio Shack, and they would tell him, oh, that's a transistor, that's a receptor. I don't know the terms. But so Mix-a-Lot had an early love of electronics that carried into his musical career through computers. He learned how to program the earliest software that allowed computers and music to come together by groups like Kraftwerk or Devo, for instance, were doing a lot of electronic beats in that era, 1980, 1981. And so Sir Mix-a-Lot was inspired by these groups like Kraftwerk to make very fast-paced songs with a lot of syncopation and a lot of high-pitched drum sounds. And then he would put funny voices over the songs to make them more clever or more creative. And it wasn't anything people had heard before. I think the one thing I really want to stress about Sir Mix-a-Lot's earliest work is the sense of humor is dynamite. It is so funny. He had so much fun making his songs. You can hear it in the voice. You can hear it in the things he says. It's a comedy genre. It's just about the genre of comedy, I would say.
Yeah, he had that classic chipmunk sound, the really high-pitched modulation. One of the great deep cuts of Mix-a-Lot that I loved that you give just a line to, but it's something that really piqued my interest is the Reduce Your Bills and Cut Your Chills collaboration with the city of Seattle. It featured a prominent Seattle rapper named Sir Wes with lyrics by Mix-a-Lot. And it was basically just this PSA on how to reduce your electric bill.
Maybe you rent or maybe you own. You can live with people or alone. A low heat bill is what you need to help you live within your means.
I mean, this was produced by the city of Seattle in 1987. That, to me, as we're looking at this timeline, seems to show that rap had really grown up to be this recognized genre in the city. It wasn't just at small-time shows at the Boys and Girls Club, for example, or on KFOX. So I guess who and what helped push rap into that mainstream here in Seattle?
Well, before we start with Seattle, I will say that Sweet J from Emerald Street Boys loves to talk about the first McDonald's commercial with rap from about 1983-84.
McDonald's has a Mac pack and they've got it at a nice price.
And as soon as a corporation like McDonald's embraces rap in their advertising, the floodgates opened. And here in Seattle, again, with people like Steve Sneed and Rico Bembry, they realized that rap was a way to reach people for important messages like energy conservation, which is a serious topic. And to make it lighthearted and sort of memorizable for the young people, they said, let's make a rap about it. They did hire Sir Mix-a-Lot to write the lyrics. I don't know why Mix didn't perform those lyrics, but Sir Wes from Silver Chain Gang did an excellent job. And that video survives today on YouTube. It's a very fantastic PSA. It's about 5 or 6 minutes long, and it's educational and fun, and it shows what hip-hop can do.
Electric heat reduces chill.
Yeah, one of the other deep cuts that I loved was the Supersonic Rap by CT, which had a short run after the 1979 Supersonics Championship, about 20 or 30 games in the 1980s, working with the Supersonics on that. That was another deep cut that it's just a fun jam.
It is time for Supersonic Rap. I said tip, tap, the ball's in play. They're going to go all the way.
That's right. Charles Thompson, the creator of that song, name checks a lot of the players from the Sonics. He talks about Gus Williams. He talks about Jack Sikma. He talks about Downtown Freddie Brown. And even as a non-basketball fan, I'm very familiar with those names as a Seattle resident. That championship team made the city proud, and people still wear a lot of Sonics gear to this day, years after the team has left the city. That brand remains as a memory and a sentimental memory for a lot of people.
So going on into the 80s, rap gains some legitimacy with broader audiences, even with the city of Seattle, as we're talking about. But did local artists ever make much of a splash on the national scene? Did they kind of reach escape velocity in Seattle?
Well, until 85, the scope of my book, none of the songs created in Seattle had a nationwide audience. There was a musician, Gary Jam from Jam Delight, who traveled back and forth to New York quite a bit and worked with some of the biggest names in rap at the time, including Davey D and WizKid on Tommy Boy Records, etc. WizKid from New York actually moved to the Tacoma area in about '84, and so he was the Northwest's biggest star, was DJ WizKid, who had a huge hit called "Play That Beat," Mr. DJ on Tommy Boy Records. So he was a bona fide star here in Seattle. But until Square Dance Rap, at the last page of my book, really the Seattle scene stays in Seattle. What happened to here stayed here. It wasn't a scene that spread. It wasn't a scene that went viral or reached a lot of other cities. And maybe that is something to do with its character. It was very insular, so everyone knew each other. The scene was very small. But until Square Dance Rap, I will say I don't think anything from Seattle really went viral, with the exception of Seven Rainier by Mix-a-Lot. I will have to say this. Mix-a-Lot tells a very famous story where he's in an elevator, I believe at the Mopop Museum, but it may not have been. He's in an elevator at some event, and Eazy-E's in the elevator with him. And Mix-a-Lot had not met Eazy-E, the late Eazy-E from NWA. And Eazy-E starts rapping the lyrics to Seven Rainier. And Mix-a-Lot turned around in the elevator and said, "What the?" And so it was a moment that he remembers very strongly. So Seven Rainier had snuck out, but I think Square Dance Rap was the first real viral hit.
Yeah, and to that point, that's where your book concludes, 1985. You wrote in the foreword that this is a moment everyone remembers when Square Dance Rap came out. Why was this song just such a big deal, and what makes it a good punctuation mark for the book?
Well, I think you alluded to the technique using the high voice. They called it the Smurf voice. That was the voice that was the name that Sir Mix-a-Lot and his friend Baron Von Scratch assigned to that voice. Little Ray Rapper called it the Munchkin voice in his song "I'm Little Ray Rapper" in 1981. And so everyone had their own nickname for this voice, but I call it the helium voice when I try to describe it to people because that's the simplest way. Square Dance Rap uses this helium voice in a way that tickles your ear. So you picture the voice as a cartoon. You don't picture it as a human. To me, it sounds like you're listening to an audio version of a cartoon. And not only that, there was a line dancing culture that was big in the Northwest. And so there were country music fans. There are still today. And to combine the country music line dancing culture and that call and response of country music with the call and response of rap was a genius move by Sir Mix-a-Lot. His ear heard the fact that, like an auctioneer does in an auction, they have to speak quickly. That's the element of rap as well. So I think Mix-a-Lot heard these things that helped to build rap and put them into Square Dance Rap, turned up the high-pitched voice, gave it a funky beat. There's nothing in that song that is copied. It's just a very piece of original music, and I think that's why the song went viral.
Well, Novocaine, we've charted quite a history here. Any final thoughts you want to leave with listeners about the book, The Birth of Seattle Rap?
I do feel a sense of urgency in my work with this book, The Birth of Seattle Rap. I was lucky to talk to so many people that were involved in the Seattle scene. Since the project began, we've already lost 4 people who I've spoken to, and that fact alone is just startling. To lose Nasty Ness is hard enough, but we also lost one of my favorite rappers from Seattle named Bobby 3D Stills from O'Day High School, class of 85. I don't think Seattle's had a rapper like Bobby, and to me, as a personal fan of rap, he's the guy that's my personal favorite rapper from Seattle. He's Seattle's Rakim, and I think there'll never be another like him. We also lost Frank Higginbotham, who was the station manager at KNHC C89 for several years, and I talk about Frank a lot in my book. He was very helpful. I spoke to Frank a number of times about what it was like at KNHC at the time, and he painted a picture for me. And so we've lost Frank. And so to have these people that I spoke to for the book not be with us anymore is just a stark reminder of how fast things change. The other person who is no longer with us is Charles R. Cross. He was the editor of the Rocket magazine, which plays a big part in my book. The fact that Charles Cross isn't here is also hard for me to comprehend. And so I was able to speak to these people while they were with us to get their stories. Again, this book is not my story. It's the story of the people in the book. And I'm just the vessel. I'm just trying to help them tell their stories.
Yeah. Well, Novocaine 132, longtime local music journalist and author, first-time author of the recent book, The Birth of Seattle Rap. Thank you so much for coming into the studio today.
Thank you for having me.
And you're listening to Soundside. I'm Gabrielle Healy. When we come back, we are talking about something I'm extremely curious about, having just moved from New York. We will identify the best slice of pizza in Seattle. Stick with us. This is Soundside. I'm Gabrielle Healy. Who makes the best slice of pizza in Seattle? The Seattle Times tried answering that question last summer with a public competition. 32 pizzerias competed for the title. And after thousands of audience votes and input from the Times' team of food writers, the publication crowned a group of finalists and one winner. The Seattle Times' food team discussed the 4 finalists on Seattle Eats with Ton Vinh, a food podcast from the Seattle Times and KUOW. Ton was joined by Bethany Jean Clement and Jackie Variano.
Coming in at number 4, Delancey and Ballard. Bethany, you're a Delancey fan. Tell us about it.
I've been a fan of Delancey since the beginning, which was 15 entire years ago now. Brandon Pettit, one of the original co-owners and the pizza super nerd there, is still in charge. He took pilgrimages to try the most revered pizzas all around the country, from Pizzeria Bianco in Phoenix to DeFara in New York. And he tried different kinds of dough, and he made pizza at different altitudes. His crust, I think, just knocks it out of the park. The salt level is perfect. It comes out with that leopard print on the bottom that everybody loves and seeks out. It's just delicious.
And I would add that he was probably one of the first, Bethany, to really use fancy sausage on their pizza.
He uses incredible ingredients, many of them local across the board. His cheese list will make a cheese lover just start weeping with joy.
Thank you, Bethany. On to number 3, Post Alley Pizza in downtown near Pike Place Market. Jackie, you know a lot about this place.
So it's been around since 1997, but the current ownership took over in 2021. And I think it changed a lot over the years, and it still is kind of evolving into itself, but they do a New York-ish style. And I just really love the incredible flavorful sauce. That's my favorite part of this pizza, because I do love a fresh tomato sauce, but I also love like a zingy, oregano heavy, bursting with flavor kind of a sauce. And that's what Post Alley does so well.
I would say that this was our most controversial discussion.
Oh, totally.
In terms of the 4 pizza. You love the pizza, Jackie, and you like the crust. Bethany, you had other thoughts.
Post Alley pizza sauce is not my favorite, with all due respect, Jackie.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I have found with the particular whole pies I've had over the years since Post Alley has been under its new ownership, I've gotten crusts that seemed too dry and sort of crackery.
I do think that they can be a little uneven, but that's just part of humans, right?
Sure.
Humans making pizza in a super busy shop. I don't think I've ever been to Post Alley where there hasn't been a line out the door of like slice seekers, and then there's little old me being like, I need 2 whole pizzas and at least 2 hoagies, and
I'm going to start eating them in the car.
I'm going to start eating them in the car, potentially right outside the shop.
For me, I think the crust has this chew that's almost like a New York bagel. So I see why New Yorkers love this pizza, this crust anyway. I mean, this crust was clearly made by a pizza geek or a bread baker. It just has a very distinctive flavor. And if we were to do a taste test, that's a blindfolded taste test, I think all of us could pick out Post Alley. It's such a distinctive
Oh, I could, for sure.
We're going to move on, and we'll talk about the first runner-up. Taking second place is Bar del Corso on Beacon Hill. It's one of my favorite restaurants. I think it's a lot of people's favorite. It's a restaurant that I usually suggest to out-of-town guests and relatives. It's along a restaurant road that's probably the hippest in the city now, sandwiched between Family Friend and Homer. The only people I know who don't like Bar del Corso is the fact that they don't think this is a legitimate Neapolitan-style pizza.
Why?
Well, because a true Neapolitan-style pizza, it's going to be soft and chewy on the crust and soupy in the center.
Oh.
See, that's not the way that most people like their pizza. I would argue like Neapolitan style pizza is so popular around the world now. I mean, I went to South America and they make really good Neapolitan style pizza.
Oh, yeah, same in Japan.
Yeah, Japan's supposed to make the best Neapolitan style pizza.
Also in Mexico.
For me, I think Neapolitan style pizza is the one style pizza that you cannot make at home. Because we're at this stage now where everyone loves to make pizza at home. But I would contend it's the one pizza that is the hardest to try to duplicate at home. For one thing, you need to cook it at 800 degrees at least. And yes, even if you buy a pizza oven off Amazon or a pizza maker, I don't care what the instructions tell you. I am convinced it does not get as hot as 800 degrees. And if it does, it doesn't retain the heat. The floor of the oven isn't hot enough. So I contend it's like impossible to duplicate.
We got my dad an uni for Father's Day a couple of years ago. And it is a wood-fired oven. It can rip to like 800 degrees. But that's the other thing about like pizza is everything. Cooking a pizza is not just having an 800-degree oven. Like my mom, God love her, her dough is like made in a food processor, or she gets like batch dough from Costco. And just because they've got this oven, it's not the same. Even if you have an oven or even if you have a really great dough, not anybody is going to be able to produce a Bar del Corso pizza. It's just not. Yeah. It's impossible.
And the pizza makers at Bar del Corso and Delancey both have tons of experience, and they are keeping that oven wood fired to this like extremely high temperature with a level of expertise that, I'm sorry, the rest of us would just be arson.
Yes, like why?
And burns.
Yeah.
You know?
The moral of the story is, do not make Neapolitan style at home. Don't even try it. Get a Bar del Corso. Oh, and if you disagree with me, you can email Jackie and Bethany at Seattle Times. Just don't bug me.
All my emails are set up to auto-forward to you anyway.
And finally, our winner, the undisputed best pizza in Seattle. It might surprise you that it's actually from Burien. Stevie's Famous, which started in Burien in 2021, but they opened a second location on Beacon Hill. And so we're going to claim it as our own in Seattle.
It's inside the Clock Out Lounge, actually, which is an incredible longtime music venue. But for Stevie's service there, it's all ages. So it is open to kids.
Oh, and I love that. So there's two places you can get Stevie's. We have some slices hot out of the toaster oven. It's a sausage pizza. And I think they make the best sausage pizza in Seattle. It's more gourmet than most spots. Pickled peppers that they do it in-house. It's caramelized onions. It's just little nubs of like sausage that has so much flavor. So let's eat.
Speaking of crust, as we were already at exceptionally great length, Stevie's crust is hands down my favorite in the city. It's got the faintest echo of a tang from their sourdough starter, which is named Ruth in honor of this activist scholar, Ruth Wilson Gilmore. And they brush the outer edges of the crust with olive oil. You can see it sort of glistens a little bit. And that's part of what makes the outer edges of Stevie's crust unleave behindable, right?
I think what makes them so distinctive is like there's that zing of fermentation that you don't get in other slice shops. It's very distinctive. And I just love it. Like you guys, I love the crust. It has that New York fold, right? It's easily foldable.
Okay, this is a hot take. If you fold pizza, it's a sandwich. Why are we folding it?
I totally agree. I feel like I don't want crust on top and bottom.
No. If I want that, I'll order a calzone.
Right, stromboli me in that case.
Yes.
It's like you're eating a calzone or a cheese pizza sandwich. I'm glad we're on agreement.
That's why we live in Seattle.
There you go.
Okay, so we haven't talked about the sauce yet with Stevie's because there is no sauce on the sausage pizza, which I do think is a choice for sure. And I do love Stevie's sauce. I think their cheese pizza is the best, partially because of the sauce. But I'm not mad that there's not sauce on this because there's enough between all the cheeses and the different onions and the spice.
It's an incredible white pie. It has like the spiciness and the richness. But I agree with you. Stevie's sauce is incredible. I feel like it gets the balance of sweet and salt and freshness and zing, like tartness, like exactly right.
And this is fancier than a slice shop needs to be. It's gourmet, and people make a big deal because it's $6 or $7 a slice, but this is legit. I mean, there's not a lot of things you can eat in this city for under $10 that's this good and this filling.
That was Seattle Times food writers Bethany Jean Clement, Jackie Variano, and Tan Vinh speaking on a recent episode of Seattle Eats, a food podcast from KUOW and the Seattle Times. You can hear more of the show and get restaurant recommendations in the KUOW app or in your favorite source for podcasts. And that's it for Soundside today. Our show was produced by former producer Alec Cowan and me. Our team includes host Libby Denkman and producers Maliha Syed, Jason Burrows, Hans Anderson, and Sarah Leibovitz. Our editor is Jed Kim. We're back tomorrow with producer Jason Burrows sharing some of his favorite segments. Talk more soon.